Wow, the moment is finally here. It is honestly a tremendous privilege for me to get to be here with you to celebrate this milestone, of course, look at the last year, but forecast the next 10 years. See, 10 years ago, there was this idea to crush it. And when you want to crush it, you're not sure whether it's going to work or not. And here we are, 10 years later, we can look back and say, we're in the midst of crushing it. And what I want to do with our time today is be able to, from 10 years from today, be able to look back, to look at each other and say, wow, we crushed it. It's tough for somebody like me in a situation where normally unhealthy organizations bring me in. It's tough when it's a good, thriving culture. What do you say? How do you, when somebody's out in front, it's a different message. And so when I look at the theme of flying high, and maybe I learned this consulting firm term from my favorite show, but I look at a blue sky. When you're out in front, when you're the leader, when all you see is blue sky in front of you, who do you use to keep you moving forward? See, if you're second, third, fourth, heck, if you're last, there's always somebody in front of you that allows you to close the gap. But when you're in front and all you see is blue sky, it's up to you how you show up every day. And so I want to talk today about this idea of breakthrough, and not only breakthrough for the business, for the organization, but also breakthrough for you as well. Now, I do want to start this conversation off back in 1905. The collegiate football season was on the verge of being canceled, outlawed. It would have been prohibition and football. The reason why was the previous season, there was over 50 deaths, and 150 water boys and players left critically injured. Maybe even a cheerleader or two, who knows? And they looked at this and they said, this can't exist anymore. We need to come up with some ways to soften the way that the game is played. See, why the game was so brutal was because you kind of just hiked the ball, you slammed into the line, you hiked the ball, you slammed into the line, you hiked the ball, you slammed into the line, and on the back end, you kind of hoped for breakthrough. It was kind of the good old boys club. I think that's probably why they chose George Clooney in that movie Leatherheads. I mean, the man's man. But they realized that this was causing the game to be brutal, so they wanted to come up with some new rules. They got very tense in their discussion, so much so that the President of the United States at the time actually got involved in the discussion. So they laid out some new rules, most of which were relatively meaningless, except for this one interesting rule. They called it the forward pass. Now, no one wanted this rule to exist because it was the good old boys club. It was the way you played the game. See, if you were bigger, you could beat the small guys because you just hiked the ball, slammed the line, hope for breakthrough. And if you were bigger, you could slam into the line better. So they put some parameters around this thing they called the forward pass. One of which was, in the attempt of a forward pass, if it became incomplete, in other words, if the ball was not caught, it became a turnover. So your opponent then received the ball. So incredible risk. In the following season, as it kicked off all around the country, as one would imagine, there was a very simple strategy. Hike the ball, slam into the line, hope for breakthrough. Hike the ball, slam into the line. I mean, you did not want to be the first team to try that sissy play of throwing the ball forward. This was the good old boys club. Except for this one little scrappy boutique, this one little scrappy college out in St. Louis. St. Louis University, headed up by Coach Eddie Cockums and his all-star boys, Jack Schneider and Brad Robinson. They saw the rule and they said, this is intriguing. And so in the preseason, they practiced some plays, they tried it out. But they too, when they started their game, hiked the ball, slammed the line, hope for breakthrough. Now at about halftime with Carroll University, the score being a solid 0-0, they said, forget it. Coach brought his players in. He said, I think it's time we run the play. As you can imagine, there was a little bit of tension around this. Like, they're the first ones to run this play, and so There's tension, excitement. They go out, they get in the huddle, and they line up. And as Brad hikes the ball, instead of slamming into the line, he starts taking steps back. And he starts looking up down the field. And Jack is running away from the play, which is very unconventional. And he throws the ball. I mean, imagine you're at one of your kids' soccer games, and all of a sudden, opponent on the other team picks the ball up, runs around your son, and throws it in the back of the net. I mean, this was what it was like. Unfortunately, the ball missed Jack's fingers, fell to the ground, and as we know, turnover. In other words, they no longer had the ball. Crowd, I would imagine, started booing. They were like, what the heck? Like, if you just hike the ball, slam into the line, like, at least there's an opportunity for breakthrough. Of course, Carroll University, what did they do? Hike the ball, slam the line, hike the ball, slam the line. They got nowhere. St. Louis gets the ball back, and what do you think they would do? Revert. But they said, no. We're pioneering something. We're on the verge of something. And typically when you're on the verge of something, you cannot quit. Pioneers don't quit. I don't even know if they know how to quit. They just keep going. And so they line back up. Once again, Brad hikes the ball. And instead of slamming into the line, he takes these steps back. He looks up and throws the ball down towards Jack. Jack catches it and continues to run the rest of the distance. And as he breaks through the goal line, not only was it a tremendous victory for them, but it was the first ever recorded passing completion and passing touchdown in the history of football. Fascinating. St. Louis University goes on to win the game 22-0. They finished the season undefeated. This scrappy little school playing against the big guys, beating them at their own game because they were not playing by the same rules. They even finished the season outgunning their opponents by over 20-1. Utter domination. This story is fascinating to me, and so with our time today, I want to look at what I believe are some of the old rules of breakthrough. And then we'll focus on the new rules of breakthrough, the things that we can utilize, put in our pocket tomorrow. Well, maybe not tomorrow, depends on how open the bar is, but maybe the day after. But I do want to preface breakthrough for one moment. Give it a little context, because I think when we think of breakthrough, we think of massive achievements, massive steps forward. We go from here to there. But often, like innovation doesn't happen in one fell swoop. There's great ideas, there's creativity, and all of a sudden we see something innovative. But there's a tremendous amount of things happening on the back end. And the same thing is true with breakthrough. So I don't want you to leave today saying, well, do you know what kind of client I work on? Do you know how long I've been stuck in Kentucky? You can't get breakthrough in Kentucky. And I put on 12 pounds because all I eat is fried chicken. There's one time I was on the road for 8 months in Corning, New York. And as you can imagine, there's not a tremendous amount to eat there. And so we'd go to Panera. And the firm I worked for, the initials were MMB. And we got bored with our life. And so we started what we called the MMB You Pick 3. You may know Panera only has a You Pick 2. Well, we modified it. You picked a full sandwich, and then you picked half a salad and a half a soup, and of course you upgraded the cup to the bowl. So, I don't want to tell you how many pounds I put on in that season, and you always had 2 cookies, because you knew you wanted one, and you weren't sure when in the afternoon you wanted another one. Breakthrough. Let's look at the old rules. Old rule number 1, this idea of chase the carrot. For a tremendous amount of years, this old rule of breakthrough, chase the carrot, a carrot and stick mentality, kind of reigned supreme. You put your nose to the grindstone, you showed up every day, and you did what you needed to do. And that absolutely has worked, and it's had its season. But a couple of years ago, when we found out about some research by Dan Pink in his book Drive, we found that this type of thinking does not help us get breakthrough. Because the old rules, you hiked the ball, slammed into the line, and hoped for breakthrough. But when you played by the new rules, you didn't just have to slam into the line and hope. You were able to step back and survey the situation and make strategic decisions. So when we look at chasing the carrot, we look at Dan Pink's research. And what he found fascinating, for highly repetitive tasks, so think about production line, or you're making widgets, for things where a production number at the end of the day matters. This type of motivation is super effective. Drives numbers, drives up production. But what he found was the moment that you had to be strategic, the moment that you had to solve complex problems, the moment that you had to become creative around huge issues, that this old style of carrot and stick motivation not only was not effective, but what he found was that it actually became a reduction of performance. They found that performance began to slip. They even found that for solving these complex problems, which I know as you go out every week, you're not hitting Control-C, Control-V. You're having to think, you're having to be on your feet, you're having to consider different alternatives. And he found that this style of motivation, this old, well, if I just keep my nose to the grindstone, if I just keep going, if I know I get to next year, this type of thinking narrowed the focus of high-performance individuals in such a way that their performance continued to drop. I think of it as the hike the ball, right? We need a reason to go to work. Before it was, well, there'll be a payoff at some point, and that was why you went to work. But no longer does that apply. Old rule number 2. This thinking of focus on the F's. For those of you who've ever brought home a report card or have kids and bring home a report card, if there's 3 A's, 2 B's, and a C, let's even say an F, what's the grade that gets the most attention? The F. What? But there's 3 A's and 2 B's. Let's say there's not even an F. If there's a C, what happened in history? And meanwhile, the kid's like, I got 100 in science and math. Like, I'm 6 years ahead in algebra. And you want me to care about Western civilization from 250 years? But it's this way that we've grown up. The attention goes to the F's. The attention goes to the F's. And there's a difference between focus and attention and awareness. I know last year you got John Coyle here, one of my friends, speaking on strengths. And tremendous. And so I don't want to go in depth on this, but this old rule of if we focus on the F's, if we kind of round things out, if we bring up the things that were not so good to a sustainable level, things will work out for us. It no longer applies. The other interesting thing is in the New York Times best-selling book, The Answer, it quotes a study where it said, by the time we turned 18, we've heard, no, you can't, 150,000 times. Now I thought, that's got to be impossible. But I have a 2-year-old now. And I started to run the numbers on just a pre-breakfast session. And I thought, it's probably possible to hit that by 10. No. The good news, though, even though we've had 150,000 kind of these negative reminders, 5,000 times we've heard yes, you can, or had this positive reinforcement. So not only have we grown up in an environment where the focus was on the F's, the D's, the C's, but we have this 30 to 1, 150,000 to 5 negative ratio running through our mind. And so no wonder we've thought to focus on the F's. And if I were to ask you, what's more fun, doing something that you love and you're good at, or doing something that you kind of suck at? I'm sure you're all wondering, how did I get into this business? Well, the best way is to go be a CPA and be an auditor for years. That's clearly the best path. That was a focus on the F's moment for me in my life. If we just ask ourselves, social science, what do I love? Focusing on the A's or focusing on the F's? There's no question. What's the ROI on our time when we drill down on something that we suck at? It doesn't. You should have seen me trying. We recently moved into a new home. You should have seen me trying to put together Brooklyn's bed. I don't do well with schematics and diagrams. My wife's pregnant and she's putting it together. And she's like, can you just tell me what to... And I'm looking at it and she's like, just give it to me. Because she knows I just don't do well with those things. Now let's talk a big picture. If we didn't have schematics, yeah, we can put together an interesting bed. Might look a little Common Core math, but who knows? Old rule, focus on the F's. It no longer applies. It has its use, but not when we want to get breakthrough. And I don't think that winners show up to work every day just hoping for breakthrough. You know, my conversations with Pete and Andy on the phone prior, I think Michael and I are best friends after 19 hours on the phone, which I would say I am at least responsible for 10 of those hours. Michael, you have at least almost 50%. I'll take a little bit more than 50% responsibility. But winners do not hope for breakthrough. Winners create. Especially if we're going to look 10 years back and say we crushed it. It won't happen on the old rules. The last old rule is the double down. No, I'm not talking about KFC's sandwich. No bun, 2 pieces of chicken. And I could list tons of companies that doubled down that are no longer with us. Kodak, Blockbuster, Borders. But I think there's an interesting one that maybe you've never heard of. I'm from Detroit now, and at one point in time there was a company called Packard Automotive. At the time they had the number one, they said, I have a newspaper clipping, said the number one most innovative automotive factory in the world. The number one. You know what's interesting? At the time of that newspaper clipping, 2 weeks later, Henry Ford released the Model T, and a company you may have heard of called GM, 2 weeks prior, they filed their paperwork for the LLC, for the incorporation. They had the most innovative factory in the globe. Over 3 million square feet. And these little guys were brand new. Yet, they continued to double down on their premium vehicles. They continued to double down on their V12 engines. Not adjusting, not adapting. Even as Henry Ford hit $100 million in profit and GM was still acting like a startup, they were continuing to double down on the way of the past. You know, when I worked at the CPA firm, I feel that about 92% of my questions were answered with, what did we do last year? I mean, one time there was a typo in a case file, and it became so repetitive that I actually copy-pasted that typo throughout an entire years of financials. Because this thinking of double down on the past, it's very hope for breakthrough oriented. But let's not spend any more time on the old rules. Let's look at the new rules. The ways that the small, that the scrappy can outgun anybody. We look at St. Louis and we look at what they did. And we saw that they could overcome any obstacles. Now, these new rules are for breakthrough. And honestly, I'm interested in that. But what I'm more interested in is spending the rest of our time this morning talking about you. And I don't normally get to say that because I feel like a lot of organizations and conferences I'm with, you know, they're like, show us the ROI on this time. But in getting to spend time, and even last night, getting to talk with some of you, and the incredible culture here. See, the thing that I'm most obsessed with is a human being. And a human being wakes up and they go to work and then they have some degree of connections and relationships and family life, and then they go home at some point. You know, I know you're on the road quite a bit, but it's a human being that goes through this cycle. It's a human being that has things that are important to them. It's a human being that their heart beats. It's a human. And I think that every human has this degree of greatness inside of them. And it's such an honor for me to get to be here with you. And whether you see it or not, I mean, yesterday afternoon when I walked in, there was already like this palpable buzz. It's just unbelievably incredible when you begin to look at what it is that you have here. And so I not only want to talk about breakthrough, but I want to talk about you. And I know that as we unleash your greatness, as we unleash your potential, the possibilities for you personally, in your development, in your dreams, I know you're with an organization that says, you know what? That's okay with me. That's actually why we exist. Yeah, we want to help our clients, but we really want to help the people that work with us, because they know as your dreams become fulfilled, as you feel more fulfilled and excited at work, that not only is your life getting better, but they know that the bottom line will stay healthy and the top line will grow too. So, new rules. Number one, this idea that Meraki beats motivation. The old rule was this carrot and stick mentality. New rule number one, Meraki beats motivation. You're thinking, what is Meraki? It is a Greek term that means the soul, the love, the creativity put into something, the essence of yourself that you put into your work. In some ways, this is very intangible. You can't quite put your fingers on Meraki. But how does it drive performance at work? How does it help us get breakthrough? This Meraki is at the heart of what I call the employee brain. We have a reason why we show up to work every day. We have a reason why we do what it is that we do. And at the center of what drives us is our employee brain. And we'll get into that a little bit more in the next 10 minutes. But at the heart of it, it is infused by Meraki. Let me give you an example. Imagine with me you're at one of your favorite restaurants. Maybe one of those restaurants that you don't attend often because of the price point. But let's just imagine this was one of those times. And so you're seated on the patio. It's like 55, 60. You can hear a fireplace crackling. You've got your cocktail. They just opened up a bottle of Brunello on the table. A little bit's in the glass. And you're just looking at each other and you're just like, the rewards. Now the server approaches the table. And as the server approaches the table, says, hello, hands the menu, says, I'm Josh, I'll be taking care of you. I just want to let you know the chef has 2 specials tonight, and one of which is it's a shrimp, and then he's doing it on the grill, and then you'll be getting a little bit of a citrus reduction. Also tonight, I do have a bone-in ribeye. It's aged for 60 days, and the chef is doing a char grill, serving that with a fig and balsamic reduction. So I'll give you some time with the menus. I'll be back. A relatively standard interaction, right? Nothing wrong, nothing bad. But then a server with some Meraki approaches the table. You don't even see it coming. This guy's been holed up in the back somewhere. They haven't fed him for 3 days. And as he approaches the table, you're almost inspired by their presence. And he holds on to the menus, and he says, good evening. Welcome, my name is Josh. I'll be taking care of you tonight. I do have a couple of additions that the chef wanted me to share with you. For the appetizer, what he's doing is some blue prawns onto the grill. You're going to get a little light char coming across the shrimp, and then he's also prepared a citrus reduction. Now, this afternoon he took oranges, squeezed them out, reduced that down, and created this vinaigrette tossed with a little arugula. So on the plate, you're going to get a little char and salty from the grill and the shrimp, balanced with that sweetness of the citrus vinaigrette. Beautiful taste to kind of open up the palate. Additionally, tonight, I have an utterly beautiful cut, a bone-in ribeye, a tomahawk, aged 60 days. Now, we've got a locker down at the Eastern Market, and this locker is lined with Himalayan salt. I mean, if you go stand in that room for 2 minutes and lick your lips, you will taste the salt. So it spends 40 days and 40 nights in there. At this point, you're like, I'm vegan and I want it. I will say the chef recommends a little bit closer to a medium because it's spent so much time in this room. The fibers in the meat, the fat has really aged so beautifully. And he wants to leave it on a little bit longer. I promise you it may be one of the best cuts you've ever had. But anyways, I'll leave you to settle in, relax. Once again, my name's Josh. I'll be here for you. Tremendous amount of effort difference between the two. Maybe a few extra words. But there was this intangible, this meraki, this love in what this guy was doing. There was like, you're like, does he eat this meal? But like, did he make this up? Like, and standard. And there's nothing wrong with standard. Yesterday I got a chili at Wendy's in the airport on my way in. And they asked me for my name. And now, I think what happened is this. They were next door to a Chick-fil-A in the airport. And so I think Chick-fil-A started rubbing off on Wendy's. Because she said, and what's your name? And then I'm waiting for my little salad and I'm waiting for my chili. And she goes, Josh, would you like some hot sauce for your chili? Would you, now the Caesar comes with Caesar unless you'd prefer a different dressing. And I'm thinking to myself, like, Chick-fil-A is absolutely rubbing off on Wendy's in this location. Because it's just those subtle differences, those small nuances that take a standard, average experience that does not leave you lacking, and there's just this extra bit of something. Your clients may love you for the work that you do. They may love you for who you are. But when your meraki is overflowing, there becomes this intangible link. This intangible, they can't even explain why it is that they love you so much, except they know that they do. So all we need is a little oxytocin. Now, if you feel like you're lacking a little oxytocin, just do this and say, Josh said I could. Just go up to one of those clients. You feel like there's a little bit of breakdown and just hug them. 20 seconds. My wife will say, I need some oxytocin, and so I know we're in for a long hug. So, you know, if you feel like there's a little tension between you and Pete, I don't know, just walk up, hey, Pete. It's 20 seconds, so it's a long time, but it works. It transfers oxytocin. So there's more than one way. You don't have to use meraki. You can just really long hugs, and then you can start looking for a job, too. I'm sure that... What happens, though, when we don't have this? What happens in our operation, our daily basis, because we think, you know, it's okay. I got a good job. I got a good paycheck. I'm happy. But all of a sudden, this element of meraki, this oxytocin, starts to go missing. Maybe you're stuck in Kentucky for too long. Hopefully nobody is in Kentucky. It's just, I figured it's a state that I don't know anything about. I've been there once and I went to a Walmart, but when we miss out on this meraki for too long, something begins to happen. The state of hypoxia. Now, hypoxia is when our brains get starved of oxygen. The same thing can happen for our employee brain, where this meraki lives, where this love lives. All of a sudden, if it goes too long, the brain starts to get starved of that beautiful resource of doing work that truly matters. Now, I know in this room, it's crazy to me. When you look at engagement research, 7 out of every 10 people do not like their... That means for most organizations, 70% of payroll goes to people who don't want to be there. I mean, hello. So if you have 70%, 80, 90%, 100 of people who want to be there, it makes a huge difference. Because this meraki, you can begin to feel it. And I know I've felt it as I've been here with you. And maybe those of you who've been here for 5, 10, 15, oh wait, not 15. Maybe to you it's just the status quo, but I'm telling you that there's something special brewing here, that you're really on the precipice of something. But this hypoxia can sneak up on any one of us. And so we look at, my wife's, it's actually my cousin, not my wife's cousin. He sent me this. He's a pilot in the Navy. And part of the process of going through becoming a pilot is you have to learn to deal with oxygen changes because you're up high and G-forces. So he sent me this video of them, and this is an abbreviated version. But what we're about to watch for 20 seconds or so is people at the point of 2 minutes without oxygen. Most of the times when you do patty cake, it's pretty, we've been doing it for a long time. And so this is quite fascinating to watch. So we're coming in now on these pilots at about the 2 minute mark without oxygen. That's just 2 minutes without oxygen. Imagine if you've worked 27 years without a little Meraki. You could see the one, he was already putting his mask back on. He was like, I'm tapped out, and the other guy was going down. So, yeah, it's funny, but Meraki is so critical, especially when we're saying, okay, the old rule was the carrot and stick motivation. It was very hike the ball, hike the ball, hike the ball. We still have to hike the ball, right? We still have to show up to work, whether we want to or not. But I look at something deeper. What drives us to want to show up to work other than just the paycheck? And one night I was on the road. This is back at the CPA firm. It was about 7:45 p.m. in the evening. My coworker, Jen, it's just her and I in this conference room. 7:45 p.m. We're both tired. At least I'm tired. And she makes this noise. And this noise was so interesting that, it's just her and me. And I had to, inquire. And so I said, Jen, are you okay? It was she goes, oh, yeah, no, I just get a tingly feeling when the numbers match. And I said, you get can you roll that back for me? She goes, yeah, I complete the account and the numbers match and I get a tingly feeling. Now I'm thinking, I just spent 4 days on this account, and the numbers matched? I spent 4 days and nothing changed? I would get pissed when the numbers match. But as I began to think over the years about Jen and her tingly feeling, I began to develop a very strategic tool that I want to share with you today. So I need you to pull out a piece of paper. If you're taking notes, you'll need about a third of a page, half a page. And on that blank page, right in the middle, draw yourself. Remember, this is a highly scientific tool. It's important you draw to scale. But I suggest stick figures. And then put a circle around you, like so. And then 4 arrows for north, east, south, and west. I have a little bit more of a sophisticated here, but it's the employee brain in the middle, but either way, you're in the middle of this scientific piece of research. The tingly feeling compass. Now, how this becomes useful for us on a consistent basis is we have these ideas of true north elements. True north elements. So like any compass, spin around, and then the compass points to north regardless of what way you're facing. And so we have these true north elements. So maybe we're saying, how do I get Meraki? How do I get more love for my work? Well, we begin to work through these true north elements, and we'll run through a few. I'll give you some example. If you write them all down, the thinking will be relatively the same. So you look at opportunities. You say, do I love chasing down big opportunities? Do I love not being involved in big opportunities? Do I love the execution on the back end of an opportunity. You begin to think about the word opportunities and your role in your job. And let's say you love chasing down big opportunities, or you love working on huge risk, huge opportunity accounts. That would be something that you put at the top around north. You'd write huge risk accounts, or whatever it means to you. If you hate that, then it goes down on the south side. You look at the industry. Obviously here, healthcare, IT, consulting, I would hope that those things would be near the top of the compass. That healthcare would be somewhere in that north region. But maybe it's not. And it's interesting because some people will say, I don't love my job, or I do love my job. And you say, why? And I don't know. This is what allows us to begin to drill down. Personality. Does your personality get to be expressed at work? I mean, imagine me at an engineering firm. Dear God, like, they'd run me out. So think about who you get to be at work. Do you love that? Do you not love that? The values. Do you feel like you get to express your values at work with the clients? Does the organization you work for resonate with those things? The pace of work. Do you love how fast-paced it is? Do you love it slower? And then you begin to rank these things. What's most important? And this is something to work on maybe later. But then the most important piece is you begin to attach a percentage. Now, on any given week, let's say I do 3 keynotes. And let's say on any given week I work 55 hours. That means that 4% of my time is doing the work that means the most to me. The Meraki, what drives me. All the emails, all the calls, all the business development, all the back and forth, all the preparation, all the late nights. All of that is driven by only 4% of my week. And so when we go through this and we begin to tussle with this as an exercise, it gives us tremendous amount of clarity and insight into who we are, what we love, and what allows us to provide more value to ourselves, to our own life, and to begin to get a degree of breakthrough. So what will it be? Meraki or hypoxia? Now, as I've been talking about this, maybe you asked yourself, or some ideas of a tingly feeling jumped into your mind. And so with the person next to you, now, I know some of you, your spouse, your partner is here. I just want to be very clear. When you're talking to them about what your tingly feeling is, this time is work-focused. If you want to have a separate chat about what your tingly feeling is later, by all means feel free. But I want you to just take 30 seconds, and with the person next to you, tell them, this is my tingly feeling at work. They'll listen, and then you switch roles. And so just take a moment, and I want you to share with the person next to you, what is it that excites you? What gives you that Meraki, tingly feeling at work? Go ahead. If you haven't already, make the switch. Make the switch to the second person. All right. Wrap it up. I trust you learned something new or exciting about the person next to you. So critically important to why it is that we show up every day. When we want to get breakthrough, when we are clear, when that Meraki just exudes off of us without trying, the competition cannot compete with that. But new rule number 2, activate and align the A's. Old rule was to focus on the F's. The new rule is to activate and align. Now, I think of an American Express Black Card. Unlimited spending ability. If you don't mind, if you had an American Express Black Card and you wanted to get a few things before you arrived this week, where would you take that American Express Black Card and where would you go? What store?
Well, actually, yesterday not with a Black Card, but I would go to Macy's to get an outfit.
Okay, yeah, you got to get a new outfit, right? So go to Macy's. So imagine you go to Macy's, you pick out a few things, you just got this Black Card in the mail, unlimited spending ability, maybe a little bit of pride attached to it. So you go to check out, you hand over the Black Card, maybe even take a step back. Yeah, it's got my name. And they run it, and it comes back declined. And whoa! And they look at you, and you're just like, run it again. And they run it again, and it's declined. And so you call American Express, and they're like, thank you for being a Black Card holder, such a privilege. And you're like, why isn't my card? I can buy a car with this. Oh, so sorry. You've not yet activated your card. What have you not yet activated in yourself? The Black Card has unlimited spending ability, but if it's not activated, it's not useful. We can go through our entire working career without ever fully activating the best parts of us. Absolutely, we tap into them. Absolutely, we use them. But without this intentional focus on where can I activate the A's, we miss out on such a beautiful opportunity to express the best part of us. The thing that's also interesting is it's not just about us. The people that we work with, the people that we're on the road with, that we eat meals with all the time, we can activate something in them. We can call out something in them. I think that this is a practical tool to use with your coach. You know what? Email them right now, because the next point is certainly not going to be as important as the point I'm saying right now. So you've got the time. But not only can you activate something in yourself, in others, but if this begins to happen, not only can you take your healthy culture, but what if you become a culture of activation? Not only it's a place where people say, I want to go work, but they're like, I got to get around these people because they are just calling out the amazing things, the amazing strengths in each other. And I know that my potential, my greatness will be limited unless I get around these people. I mean, how cool would it be to not only have a healthy culture that services clients, saves lives, but also activates the best part of others? It's one thing to activate, but it's also important to align. It's not like you and I have one thing that we're good at and one thing that we're bad at. We have this whole slew, this whole gamut. And so many times I think the strengths and weaknesses, it becomes confusing. What are my A's? What are my F's? And I just want to say, if you begin to ask yourself this question, think about it like a chessboard. All the pieces have different value. You don't ask a bishop to do what the knight does. A properly placed pawn can be the most powerful piece in the whole board. So begin to think about the things that you excel at, the A's, the B's, and begin to kind of map them out. Think about how you best use them, but make sure that you activate them. So new rule number 1, Meraki beats motivation. New rule number 2, align and activate the A's. By this point, we've dropped back. We've not just slammed into the line, and we're looking for what's next. If the double down was what worked before, disruptive leadership is what scrappy winners use in the new business economy. Back in March 2011, at 2:46 off the coast of Japan, there was a tremendous earthquake. This earthquake was so big, the Earth is now 1.8 microseconds shorter. It caused the Earth to move so much, and with such a rapid force, it triggered a tremendously devastating tsunami. Now, when this happens with such force, a tsunami out in the open water actually travels at about 500 miles an hour. The interesting thing is, if you're out at sea, you just feel it like this, because all the power is underneath. So there's no way to see it coming. But the town of Kamaishi, they knew it was coming because the sirens were sounding. The alarms were going off. Yet, 3 interesting things happened. They knew this devastating tsunami was coming. But 3 things happened. 1, the ships, they didn't cut anchor. They thought, we'll be fine. There's a wall that had been built, a 30-year project, multi-billion-dollar wall that they were told would keep them safe. So they rested on this assumption that this wall would keep them safe. So they didn't cut the anchor. They didn't get out to sea. And these boats, I'm not sure he'll be catching any fish soon, but these boats ended up inland or destroyed. The second interesting thing that happened is that nobody ran. In fact, people stepped to the walls. People stepped closer to the oncoming change, to the oncoming tsunami, because they had so much faith in the protection of the walls that they actually moved closer to their death instead of doing something proactive. But the third interesting thing that happened was called the miracle of Kamaishi. Now, this school, Kamaishi East, was completely devastated. Yet, none of the students in that school lost their lives. None of the teachers in that school lost their lives that day. And so they began to look at the research. Why is this? They actually came in and studied. Tens of thousands of lives were lost. Yet this school, how did they survive? And the research led them to this gentleman called Toshikara Katada. And they found that he would go around and he would teach these principles to these students. The first principle that he taught them was to follow principles, not pathways. He said to avoid outdated assumptions. See, a lot of the adults, they said, well, I know where the emergency path once was. I've got this map from before. So if I have to run, I'll be okay. Katada said, avoid the outdated assumption. Follow principles, not the pathways of the past. Be led by something. He also taught them to lead with an innovative attitude. See, the conventional thinking was, we've had earthquakes, relatively common for them. They've heard the sirens from the tsunami. They have the wall. So why should we fear? And so what would happen is that nobody would begin to move. No one would take leadership because they didn't want to be the one to look off base. So we taught them to lead with an innovative attitude, to become the first mover. And the last principle that he taught them was not to hesitate. He said, if you take initiative, others will follow. So on a devastating day, these children, once again, small, scrappy, agile, are surviving and outgunning the big. He said, I told the students that they must be brave and be the first ones. Because if you do, others will follow you. And you can save their lives too. And that is exactly what happened. You know, maybe it's a little extreme to say that Pete and Andy and the leadership have saved your lives. But 10 years ago, with a vision and an idea and a desire to make something special, they have forged in, as the video said, not by themselves, but with all of you to thank, with all of you at the helm. They've no longer just hoped for breakthrough. You all have no longer just hoped for breakthrough, but you have gone out and you have achieved and you have created the breakthrough. And if you take these 3 new rules and you begin to put them in play, and you begin to push the old rules aside, I guarantee you that in 10 years you'll be looking at each other and say, we crushed it. We crushed it. The Rocky beats motivation. Activate and align the A's. Cut the anchor and be disruptive with your leadership. In closing today, I was raised on 2 things in baseball. It's a good day in baseball if 1, the Yankees lose, and 2, if the Cubs win. Now, most of my life, it was usually a bad day in baseball. Kerry Wood came along, and hey, at least there was some strikeouts to celebrate, right? But when I watched last year, when I watched the incredible turnaround, it became so fascinating to me, so interesting to me, looking at the degree of difference, the degree of change between being a winner, being an all-star, yet being average or being left behind. And when we look at baseball, average, which I would say winners, all-star, which winners, their batting average comes in somewhere around 325. An all-star player, a winner quality player, 325 average. Now, an average player, which is still an incredible baseball player, comes in at about 275. So throughout the course of 1,000 at-bats, the all-star has hit the ball 50 times more than the average person. And this is the difference. This is where the huge difference comes in. Just these 50 hits, these 50 at-bats. Yet, on one given season, you only go to bat 500 times. So instead of the difference being 50, the difference was actually just 25 decisions in a year. 25 decisions are the difference between being an all-star, being a winner, versus being average. And so today, in the context of breakthrough, in the context of Meraki, in the context of as you leave and you go to take on fresh challenges and new opportunities, don't become overwhelmed. Don't think to yourself, well, I don't know if I can do all of these things. Be encouraged, be empowered, because it only comes down to 25 decisions. The difference between all-star and average. The difference between being a winner who gets breakthrough and being average and just fighting in the trenches, hoping you get breakthrough. You can activate 5 people's strengths. 5 weeks you can ask yourself, what am I best at? What are my A's? 10 days, 10 times, 10 moments, you can look and say, well, I know why I love what I do. I know why I love these clients. And a handful of times you can lead with a disruptive, innovative approach. And if you do those things, I promise you that staying a winner, that flying high, that continuing to crush it will be the only option for you. Thank you.